and we will be welcoming that to be able to shape our debate.
Indicated above, and the key things that we're going to look at are the crop performance, the maize stocks and maize balance sheet, the maize marketing and market prices, and fertilizer availability and prices. Then we'll look at the conclusions and policy recommendations. To start with the background, we all agree that food security is viewed as synonymous to maize availability. When we don't have maize, Kenyans say they don't have food. And structurally, as a nation, we are a maize deficit. And oftentimes when we have serious shortages, we see the government coming in to intervene to ensure that food is accessible, especially to the poor and at affordable prices. Now, Tegemeo conducts a food situation assessment to supplement forecast by other players in the agriculture sector. And this year, our study was conducted in June, and it was conducted in both surplus and deficit areas. Ideally, I mentioned earlier that we are mainly a deficit country, and as we can look at our graph there, the brownish line is that one, is the maize production. This is our consumption, and we see that oftentimes our consumption is way above what we produce. And we can see that oftentimes when we have serious shortages, as mentioned, like in 2008, 2009, we had to import, and you can see the high rise in the quantities that were imported. And these are the areas that we visited, and the key information that we obtained from the people we interviewed, who include the farmers, the Ministry of Agriculture staff, and traders involved, transporters and millers, was useful to help us in providing projections on expected maize supplies, the cost of production, and the price trends. So going to my results, the crop performance and outlook. According to the Ministry of Agriculture, the area they had achieved as at June was 1.3 hectares. And with that, they estimated that their output was going to be about 43.4 million, and has since been revised. That is, according to the August report, they indicate that 24 million bags would be achieved. According to our assessment, in the long-range production would produce about 28.9 million bags. And in comparison to 2012, this is a decline. And the decline, we attribute it to several factors, including delayed planting, reduced or lack of fertilizer application, leaching of nutrients, change of enterprise mix, among other factors. Now, as a nation, the ministry estimates that we usually have 15% of long rain harvest from the short rains. And the total estimated production, according to us then, if we estimated at 28 million the long rains, an additional 4 to 5 million bags would lead us to about 33.9 million bags. And our estimated consumption per year is 40 million bags. Now, if we do quick mathematics, this is about 15% deficit. And the recent population projections by KNBS show that we are about 43.5. So if initially at 40 million we are thinking we are a deficit by 15%, then if we think of population being 43.5, then it may be as high, could be as high as 20%. This graph gives an estimate of yields and prices in comparison to other regions in Africa, South Africa especially. And on the left side, we see the yields, the tons per hectares. And when we look at it, Kenya is doing about 4 tons per hectare. Tanzania is doing about 3, and this is Tanzania again is doing about 2 different scales. This is Kenya, this is 2 hectares in Trans Nzoia. This is Tanzania in Iringa. They're doing about 4.5. This is South Africa. They're doing about 3.5, 3.7 there, and about 4 tons per hectare. And the bars that you see is equivalent to what we say like farm gate prices. And this would be like the revenue a farmer would get from the hectares that he did, and this is about $285 in Kenya. And when we look at the bars, they are almost the same. Well, you may look at the, Malawi and see it is way off, but apparently there are few issues that they need to look into to confirm that this is the actual case. But you can see we compare with the others in terms of the farm gate prices. The next aspect we were looking at is the maize stocks, and as at 31st of May, estimates were about 18 million bags, and supplemented with imports from the region and private sector, we get to about a total of 18,399,000. But then we also are continuing to consume, and there are also losses that come in. So when we factor in issues of post-harvest losses, what goes to animal feeds and so on, we estimated that by 31st of July, we'll be having about 8.9 million bags. Now, between July and now, lots of things have happened. The South Rift, Nyanza region and Western harvests of about 2 million have been factored in. And the total estimated harvest is going to be about 26 million. If we add regional imports of 1.8, the total stock that we would have will last about 6 months. And this will take us to about 12 million bags by end of January. In addition, we think of short range harvest, which according to the previous slides I had indicated that the ministry estimates about 4 million on the lower side. If we add that, then it will take us to about 3 to 4 months post-January, that is until April or May. But we are saying that we need to closely monitor the maize situation, especially with regard to the period thereafter. Now to maize marketing and maize prices. For the better part of the year, and I'll show you a graph a bit later, those prices were a bit stable. Now this we attributed to good harvests in the last year, and I believe the ministry will agree with us on that. Then we also had inflows from neighboring countries, and also there was decreased activity by NCPB as a maize buyer during this period. I will also show us a graph on the same. And unlike previous years, wholesale prices across markets did not rise during the March to June period. And it is only until the month of March when the prices started inching up, and currently are averaging about 3,000 shillings per bag. This graph shows us what the NCPB has been purchasing since 2000 to 2013, and we can see a declining trend. In 2008, 2009, when we had a problem, we see they really purchased a lot of maize. But as at now, we are doing about 600,000 bags. As I mentioned earlier, we were out in the field, and one of the things we looked at was the price trends. Initially in January, the prices they vary with the regions as shown, but they were a bit high, ranging between about 1,800 to almost 3,200. But towards March, April, May, where often we have the government coming in, the prices were apparently converging towards about 2,000, between 2,000 and 2,500. Now, if we compare the same period over the years, we see that March to June here, the prices, this is what they usually are. When we get to 2012, about the same time, this was the price. This time round, there was no government intervention or NCPB purchases, and we can see what happened. Then on to fertilizer. You all will agree with me that fertilizer and seed are very important inputs in our production. But this year, as we talked to different stakeholders, they said there were many challenges. And one of the issues that we would like to say here is that since 2008, the government has been importing fertilizer through NCPB to boost production and to improve on enterprise profitability. But the difference between the commercial and the NCPB prices range to between 30 and 41%. So the commercial are about 30 to 41% higher than the commercial outlets. Now, the other aspect we looked at is the quantities imported, and from the reports, it indicates that about 60,000 metric tons of DAP and about the same of CAN is always purchased. But you will agree with me that the way we always produce, the recommended fertilizer rates for most regions is about a bag per acre. Now, 60,000 metric tons is way below, and we are saying this is inadequate to improve our production. The differences in prices, this was the price, the commercial price in 2012, this was the price in 2013, and this is the difference in price. You can see it ranges from Eldoret, there was a bit of a drop, and the rest is about, the highest is about 7% difference. Then when we compare 2013 commercial vis-a-vis NCPB prices, we see that there's a difference of between 30 and 41%. That's the difference the subsidy makes in terms of price. So the key highlights are the 2013 different prices between the different outlets. And in conclusion, we are saying that what is available will last the country till January. And we are saying currently there's a positive situation, but we need to closely monitor what will be available. Another aspect we want to bring out is that many farmers decided not to purchase fertilizer as they waited for the subsidized fertilizer, especially in regions where they have access. And I think this dependency syndrome may be one thing that is contributing to delayed planting and reduction in fertilizer application. The other thing is, when farmers know that there will be a subsidy, they tend to relax and wait for that subsidy, which now alters their behavior, thereby affecting production. The other aspect we want to bring out is that post-harvest losses may be higher, and this may be due to continued rainfall. We hear from the news that it's still raining in the grain basket areas, so perhaps there may be need for dryers and funds need to be mobilized towards this. We also mentioned that prices remain fairly stable in major markets. So among our recommendations is that we need to closely monitor crop performance and national food stocks so that we avoid the volatility in prices and supply shortfalls. Another aspect we need to do is with the continued rains, and this is about the harvesting time in the grain basket, we may need to prepare, in preparation, look for resources to get dryers to ensure that the post-harvest losses are minimized. Another aspect we would like to highlight is that decreased market participation by NCPB shows stability in price. So we are recommending that perhaps the government ceases to intervene in the maize market, or else if they have to purchase, which I think the representative alluded to, is that they would then purchase at the market prices. The other aspect we'd like to talk about is, as I mentioned, fertilizers, yes, are subsidized, but we find that it is not distributed to all regions, and oftentimes it's not accessible to those who really want to produce much more. Therefore, we are recommending that if the government has to purchase fertilizer, then they have to ensure there's adequate amounts, they're available to a large number of farmers and in all maize growing areas, and it should be delivered on time and at the nearest point possible, because these are some of the highlights that producers are mentioning. For ease or to ensure that this can be done, then we are advocating or we are recommending that there should be private sector partnership, or they should purchase from the private sector. We would like to acknowledge the general support of USID and all the other people who participated in assisting us. This is what we aim at, a full store at the lowest level possible. So let's work towards seeing that this is done. Thank you.
I will be presenting to you some work that was done by a team from our institute. And we went out and we looked at the implications of the VAT Act. And specifically for today, we are looking at animal feeds. As you are all aware, after the VAT Act was enacted and it came into force in the first week of September, there was a lot of outcry, especially by consumers who decried the high cost that consumers will have to pay as a result of the VAT. But actually, we did not see, for example, the farmers' organization or the producers' organization coming in the same length or talking about the VAT Act and how it's going to affect us as producers in the same way as consumers had complained. And the intention of the Act was actually to increase the efficiency in collecting VAT. As you remember, previously we had different rates for different commodities, and the Revenue Authority thought that it would be easier. Actually, we had a similar rate, and if the category of goods that were going to be taxed for VAT were charged at the same rate. So this was supposed to help in terms of collecting and even for refunding people who had people who actually claim, and these are the producers. Another intention is that it was to raise an additional 10 billion shillings for the government. And as you are aware, as a result of the devolved system of governance, the government expenditure has increased significantly. And the philosophy behind the VAT Act was to actually shift the burden to those who can afford. So I believe most of the people in this room are the people that were being targeted by the VAT Act. So in an ideal situation, I think everybody would have been happy. So the government would have collected more money from those who are able to pay, the consumer would have been protected, and we would have had efficiency. But I think this is not the case, and this is one of the reasons why we are here. So the key objective of the government, as mentioned by my colleague earlier, is that, one, the government has to maintain prices which are affordable to consumers, and especially the urban dwellers. But then these prices should be profitable enough for the farmers or the producers in this case. Looking at the Kenya Vision 2030, the key thing we see there is competitiveness. So the government has to ensure that the farmers are competitive, because we live in an area of now free markets. Even in regionally, we have the East African community, we have the Comesa region. So we cannot really restrict goods and services that are coming from those from these countries. It is actually the government has to ensure that whatever we produce is we are competitive enough to be able to even penetrate the other markets. So as Mr. Ndenya mentioned earlier that we want to be exporting even our agricultural produce, then this is something that the government actually wants to achieve. So to actually achieve these objectives, some of the initiatives that were put there before was that agricultural inputs were subsidized, and as we mentioned earlier in the previous presentation, we had the fertilizer subsidies. We also have several incentives that were given for the producers so that we can maintain this kind of competitiveness. And they're also exempt from VAT. But in the VAT Act of 2012, we realized that agricultural inputs, for example, like fertilizer, seed, and pesticide, they're still exempt. We have all unprocessed foods, that is including maize, wheat flour, rice. These are also exempt. But animal feeds are not exempt. And in the manufacturing of animal feeds, we are using raw inputs which are actually a byproduct. There's some value addition on something in the sense that it now attracts VAT. So as a result of this, for example, for the livestock sector, and this is one of the reasons why we focus on the livestock sector, is that you'll realize that the inputs and the output, they're attracting VAT. So for the output such as milk and eggs, those ones are exempt from VAT. But the agricultural inputs, because to produce the animal feeds, you need to use things like maize germ, wheat germ, pollen. These are byproducts of milling. and as a result, they do attract 16% VAT. So after the VAT was enacted, what we saw was a general increase in prices. And as you see here, you remember the issue of milk. Milk actually went to as high as 57 shillings, and the consumer lobbies groups actually really complained. And what happened is that